that we have. We want to talk a little bit about Darius' own ancestors. There were a couple of times when, as we were writing the books, we actually wept. And one was when we were writing about Lewis Gray and his wife, Gracie Gray. I'll let Darius introduce them, and then I'm going to read a passage from Bound for Canaan.
I am Darius Gray. Darius Gray was born in 1896. It's not just that I'm black and I age gracefully, but we're talking about my father. My father was Darius McKinley Gray. Named McKinley because that was the year President McKinley was elected. My father's father, my grandfather, was James Lewis Gray. He was born in 1859 in the state of Missouri as a slave. History isn't that far back, really. My granddad was born a year before Lincoln was elected, and 2 years before the beginning of the Civil War. As a child, I grew up hearing stories about back in slave days, such and such and such and such. And so that was a part of my heritage, and it gives me a sense for those people that I don't know that many others here would have. My granddad had a father and a mother, and my granddad's father was Lewis Gray, born about 1827, and he was the son of a woman by the name of Maria Gaines. Maria Gaines was born approximately 1796. That's just 20 years after the founding of this nation in 1776. We were here. We were slaves, but we contributed to the fabric of this nation. But if we go forward from Maria Gaines to her son Lewis and to his marriage to my great-grandmother, we have an interesting story which Margaret will now read from. I tell you this because I hope it gives you a sense of my history, because my history is actually our history. It's American history. We share it.
We did a lot of research on what slave auctions were actually like in order to do this. I'm just going to read a few sections. This is Lewis going with his master Mortimer Gaines to an auction where the woman who will be his wife, Gracie, is being offered. Whoever had sent this woman to auction had gone to some trouble making her look good. Her hair was braided down both sides and tied in colorful ribbons. Her blue dress and muslin apron were not new, but they were clean. He wondered why anyone would sell her off. Well, sometimes folks just needed money. He understood that and knew that if his own master should find himself in straits, the slaves would likely get sold before the furniture would. Of course, the master would never sell off all his slaves. That household couldn't run itself, and nobody with a colored help knew how to keep it running. If some slaves got sold, the remaining ones would simply get more work. He thanked God his master was living well off, with hogs to process and meat to sell. Lewis Gray had known his mama, Maria Gaines, all his born days, and he had never seen an auction till now. Moving forward to the auction, the master to Lewis, "What do you think, sir?" "Take a good look." Lewis obeyed. "She's sad, but not sick." "How about her arms?" "They're fine, master." "Tolerable strong from what I can see." "Legs?" "Can't say, 'cause I can't see." "She'll need to walk for us. I won't have a cripple. What else do we need to look at, Lewis?" It was then in a cold sweep of realization that Lewis understood why the master had brought him on this trip into this auction. "Master, this is my first time. You knows your way around." "I want to view the teeth. No need to buy a mouthful of trouble. You pay enough for us lady, you better get your money's worth. I paid considerable for your mama, found her at a fine auction over in Kentucky. And she's been worth my investment. I won't settle for less than the best. I'll need to check the teeth on that woman before I turn over a penny." We move forward to them making the purchase and then going back to the Gaines home. It wasn't until a week later that they were back in Marshall at the Gaines slave quarters that the woman told her name, not to Lewis, but to his mama, Maria. "My name, Gracie," she said. I remember as Darius and I were at the computer, reading, we would read the words out loud to make sure we had the voice right and all of that. But reading that phrase, "my name Gracie," realizing that this was his ancestor and what her life had been like, and just that realization of she was real. No matter how close we got to what her life actually was, she was real, and we're going to do our best to pay tribute to that, to the life that she led. I think we'll move now into Elijah Abel. Let me just turn to his picture. And, oops, I didn't mean to go that far. Have Darius explain just a little who he was, and then the idea of imagining why he made petitions for temple blessings, what it meant to him to ask for those petitions.
This is one of my heroes. This is quite a man. Brother Elijah Abel joined the church 1832, ordained to the LDS priesthood in 1836. He served 3 full-time missions for the church to the eastern states and Canada. He came back from his latest mission in time to die. But he also worked on 3 of the first temples, not the very first, but he worked on the Kirtland, the Nauvoo, and the Salt Lake temples. Yesterday, I had occasion to be with 2 of our Genesis members, 2 sisters, and we were at the funeral for Elder Haight at the Tabernacle. And when we had finished with that, I said to the sisters as we walked by the temple, "Come on over, we need to go over and pay our respects." There is a corner on the east side of the temple, a stone, that whenever I'm in the area, I go by and I give a rub and I pat it and say, "Brother Elijah, that's for you." I remember that good man and his contributions to this faith. I've also had the honor and pleasure of doing the very same thing in Kirtland and in Nauvoo. So this man is a part of our history. He was a significant part in the early Smith home, and Sister Young will add to that now.
Go to his patriarchal blessing. This is a facsimile. This was given to him by Father Smith. And Father Smith tells him he's like an orphan. He actually did have a biological father, but he says, "Thy father hath not done his duty towards thee." But imagine what it felt like to Elijah Abel, who history suggests had used the Underground Railroad, had probably spent some time as a slave. Imagine what it felt like to him to be told, "Thou hast been ordained an elder and shalt be protected against the powers of the destroyer." And then to be washed and anointed in the Kirtland Temple to serve the missions. Then to go to Salt Lake, and by this time the policy had been set, and he petitioned to go to the Salt Lake Temple and was turned down. But then President Brigham Young died in 1877, and as Darius and I researched what was happening in Elijah's life and looked at the dates, we understood why that petition would be raised again, because his wife was very ill. For us to imagine what their relationship was like, and the thought that he knew sealing ordinances were happening in that temple, and how desperately he must have wanted to be sealed to Mary Ann, his wife. And so the petition was raised again. He was told he still had priesthood. In fact, his obituary is fascinating, because it says he died of old age and debility upon consequence of serving his 3rd mission for the church. The deceased held the Melchizedek priesthood, and then it gives the certificate of ordination, the number. He was ordained to 70, as is shown in, and then it gives the certificate. So the person writing the obituary was quite aware of the controversy about Elijah Abel's priesthood. But the idea that Elijah Abel had desperately wanted to be sealed to his wife. And then what became even more interesting was, and by the way, this is a picture that I show with a whole lot of care. This was given to us by a great-great-great-grandson of Jane James, who's very nervous that if people get a hold of it, they'll make t-shirts out of it and all sorts of things. I show it here. I do not give it to anybody for any use whatsoever. Louis Duffy is copywriting it, and we'll probably put it in a book at some point. but you can just see Jane James. But as we were looking to look at when Jane James began petitioning for temple blessing, her first letter to